Hello everyone.
Hello everyone.
We are back with another episode of Talk to the Chip. And today we're going to talk about Argentinian pioneer Beatriz Ferreyra.
Perfectly pronounced. You were obviously Spanish in a previous life.
This is one of the rare times I could pronounce a composer's name without an error. Okay, we don't have to do much editing work then, huh?
Well, you did very well with Bülent Arel.
Oh, guess why?
Yes.
Okay, and you were also doing well too. So we wanted to talk about this composer, especially because I have most recently seen a performance by her in the good old Café Otto, where we recorded some of our episodes.
Yes. Our spiritual home.
Yeah, but it is too loud to record there.
Yes, it's much quieter here in Ormantepe.
Ormantepe, yes. We are actually recording... This is the fourth episode we are recording in Ormantepe. For those who don't know where Ormantepe is, it's not in Istanbul. It is in London. It's just Forest Hill.
Yes, Forest Hill, southeast London. Belly of the beast.
Okay, that's the thing.
So yes, Beatriz Ferreyra. And most of her working life, most of her life, in fact, has been in France.
Yeah.
And the particular piece that we're looking at is a collection of her work on the GRM.
Please, can you pronounce the French version of GRM? I am going to avoid that.
GRM.
Yeah.
I hope
Pierre
that's...
Schaeffer.
Exactly. And what we're going to look at is called Recollection GRM and her GRM Works.
Yeah.
So 4 pieces...
From the 1960s.
Yes, they spread across quite a long period. And this is actually something I found quite interesting listening to this, was that the earliest piece is from 1967 and the latest piece is from 2011. So that's almost 40 years.
Yeah.
But there doesn't seem to be a big disconnect with the style, with the technology.
Yeah, 40 years, but there are a lot of similarities. But also there are some differences that you can still find.
Yeah. And so she has a very strong and recognizable voice. There's a very strong character in her stuff.
And I think that is because of filters.
Yes, she relies a lot on filters. Filters are really, really important. Well, filters are a really important tool in electronic music generally.
Subtractive synthesis.
Yeah, it's the absolute heart of subtractive synthesis.
It is, yeah.
You know, the way that a filter works is that there are basically 4 types of filter. And what happens, what you do is you set a frequency, and so for a low pass filter, everything below that frequency is what you hear.
Yeah.
Then high pass filter is the opposite, so everything above that frequency that you set is what you hear. And then you have what's called a notch filter, where just that frequency gets filtered out. And then you have a band pass filter.
Band pass filter, yes.
And that means that it only allows an area around that filter to get through, and that's what you hear.
Yeah.
And she, different filters, different types of filters have different characters. And
our heads are also our heads are filters.
Yes.
So when we hear sound from both ends, it's all determined by what we have got, and so our heads are basically can be actually more like a low pass filter.
And also our mouths are a filter. The sound we use filtering the sound of our breath and filtering the sound that comes from our vocal cords is a big part of our voices, of how we communicate.
Natural
and in fact,
filters.
that's another thing, is the way that I had explained to me once years ago what a resonance is on a filter. So how resonance works on a filter is if you turn up the amount of energy going into a filter enough, that the filter frequency that you've selected starts to resonate and becomes a pitch in its own right. And I had this explained to me brilliantly once, that if you use your mouth as a filter, if you just make a shh noise and filter it, you go by using your lips. Now, if you put enough power into it, you go it starts
Your
to
high pass filter.
exists exactly. It starts to whistle,
Yeah.
and that whistle is the resonance.
I didn't know you could whistle so good.
Thank you
So
very
well.
much. Je suis le siffleur.
Okay, so let's go back to GRM Works then.
Yes.
I
So-
don't know, filters, we
Yeah.
were talking about filters being at the center of Ferreyra's music.
Yeah, and I think particularly, I think there's a really, really good example in the second piece in this collection, which I think is the longest. No, the second to longest one. It's 17 minutes long. 18 minutes? 17 minutes 58. And it's called Un fil invisible, an invisible thread.
Oh, I'm happy we have someone who can speak French here.
And it's the first section of it is really you're hearing white noise being filtered by a random filter source.
It's like it's 2009, but it's very much like the kind of early works produced in the etudes produced in GRM.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah.
Very good in that. So it's basically wider sampling pioneers.
Yeah. I mean, you say etude. I mean, if you think of like Luc Ferrari and these guys who really, or Pierre Schaeffer.
Pierre Schaeffer's etude with the trains. You
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Woo,
Well,
woo.
but you can. I mean, with those pieces, that they are very obviously intellectual exercises.
mean? Yeah.
Whereas hair music,
Very artistic.
hair music has a real strong narrative sense.
Yeah.
The first track in this collection, the aquatic dwellings, Demeure aquatique. It's a very strong narrative feeling. It sounds like a film soundtrack.
Yeah.
You could really imagine it's very visual. You can hear a sense of storytelling going through all her stuff. It's not abstract academic exercises and studies in sound, is it? She's telling a story all the time, I think.
There is actually a narrative. Yeah, it's not just etude or exercise.
Yeah. It's very kind of artistically relatable, isn't it?
Yeah. And another thing that comes across is she did compose music for quadraphonic setup.
Yeah.
And in Cafe Otto, where it was packed, when I saw the gig, which was something very good for them, when Beatriz... So that was the gig. Ferreyra and Langham Research Centers each did sets, and we basically could listen to Ferreyra's music in a surround setup. And I was not in the middle of the room, sadly, but even if I wasn't, it was still very much like moving and super impressive experience. Because then you could appreciate that her music is very much curated for that kind of a setup. And especially the works in this album, I think, and the one you were just talking about, please can you pronounce
Well, the first
second?
one, Des Murs Aquatiques, the aquatic dwellings.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, so that's definitely something for surround experience with more than 2 speakers.
Yeah.
So that is also something central in this composer's work. And in the earlier episode, we talked about another composer who attached a lot of importance to space. Of course, that was a very different approach, Marianne's approach. In both of these, I think what I see is fascination with use of multiple speakers. And then today, when they're trying to standardize that brand, like, are we allowed to talk about brands, or do we need to? Is it a commercial? The one that is the fruit. D. The one that starts with D. So that is kind of becoming a standard now. But
it is. Well, the thing is, I think we can say Dolby Atmos. It is becoming a standard because Apple Music have put so much money into it, and I think what the reason why it's becoming a standard in a way that basically 5.1 from 20 years ago failed. Was that it didn't have a standardized mix down.
Yeah.
It didn't render standardly into stereo, so it never sounded right in stereo.
People had to buy very expensive equipment to access it, and we saw remastered 5.1 remastered versions of some 70s prog albums. And I know some people who have that kind of a setup, but it's not for everyone. But now they are trying to make it accessible in stereo format by creating an illusion of that. And I wonder how would these pieces sound.
Well, it's interesting. And it's also, I've listened to all of Ferreyra's works only in stereo.
Yeah.
But you still get the sense of the space, because if you're creating music for objects channels moving around in space, or for 4 channels, it makes you write differently. It makes you think differently.
Definitely. So it's one of the pieces, Médisances, the third one in the album. Yeah. That was originally
called Médisance is quite a weird name for a piece, because it means,
what does that mean?
It means slander or backbiting, or one translation of it is scandal mongering. But it's a very negative.
She says slander is not meant to be of a descriptive nature, and any interpretation of the music along those lines would be a complete misconception. There is this note about that piece.
Yeah. Well, and then she says, "Honi soit qui mal y pense."
Do we need a French translation?
The thing is that's but "Honi soit qui mal y pense" is a French expression that is very important in English, because it turns up in English heraldry. One of the English kings had it written on their heraldic sign, and it means shame on anyone who thinks badly. So it's basically saying that the shame is in the thinker's mind, not in
nice. And that's for 4 channels. So thank you for the translation. The funny thing is, my second release is in French, and it's called L'Appel de Vide. And the piece, L'Appel de Vide, actually, it was commissioned by Bilgi University in Istanbul they wanted me to compose it for quadraphonic setup, and that was one of my earlier experiences. Like I did do we did gig under the theme surroundscapes. We did create a quadraphonic. So for me, L'appel du vide, it took me months to finish that piece, but that's one of the pieces that I feel the happiest about.
And what's it mean? The call of space, is it?
The call of the void.
Of the void.
So it's around 11 minutes long, but the release is in stereo, obviously. But originally, that's how. So you were talking about like when you were working in that setup when you compose music. It actually, it shapes the experience very much.
Absolutely.
So,
and even when it's reduced to stereo, it's a different piece of music than it would have been if you'd have originally conceived of it in stereo. I mean, I was just thinking then about, in the 80s and 90s. Well, actually, going back to the 70s, with even with the GRM 3D performances, when they performed music for multi-speaker arrays, what they were often doing was taking stereo recordings, stereo masters, and just using a mixing desk to pan it around the different speakers in the space. It was quite an art form. Considered an art form in the 80s, this idea of diffusion.
Yes.
That someone would sit at the mixing desk and perform a stereo piece by moving it around in the space.
Yes, that's what we did in this surroundscapes gig in a way, diffusing the sound around with a playback.
But that's different to actually composing a piece.
Yes, exactly.
For 8. I mean, I've just done a piece now for Dolby Atmos, which is 10 channels. So it's 7, 1, and then 2 in the ceiling.
Yeah.
That's becoming a standard now.
Marvelous.
Driven to a large degree by Apple and also by cinema sound.
Yeah, I mean, when I went to Cafe Oto, I would have loved to ask Ferreyra about it a lot. I'm so curious. But it's very nice in a way that she was surrounded by too many humans. So many people appreciated her music. I just didn't want to disturb her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I could not say hi. But I was very much under the spell of the experience. Because in all of these pieces in the album and what I listened to in the gig, there's a lot of movement of objects. I'm not talking about moments in the piece in different sections. Different objects, just like you were talking about the soundtrack like feeling, like a narrative. So you're in the middle and these objects come and go to you, they are all touching you and then leaving, something else comes. And the transitions are very smooth also. There is lots of change just happening, but the use of filters, I think, make them very smooth, you know? They make it very much like actually they are affecting the moves in a way. Filters are also determining the object's positions.
Absolutely. Well, that's another thing with spatialization is that, I mean, for years I worked with my band Meta Mono in mono.
Yeah.
And you can create space in mono because first of all you've got the obvious thing of reverb of putting a space on something and delays, but the other thing is sounds with lots of high frequency sound closer than sounds without so much high frequency. So if you imagine a really nice picture of this, if you imagine a herd of you're on the prairies in the States and you imagine a herd of buffalo running towards you, the first thing you hear is the low frequencies, the rumble. And then as they get closer, you get more and more of the high frequencies. High frequencies don't travel as far as low frequencies. So, you can create spatialization and depth using filters or using, expertly in her case, controlling the high frequencies to make things sound a bit more distant. So again, that's very, very expert, clever use of filters.
Just like Mono.
Just like indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, something that's really nice about her work is how she finds moments to have sounds on their own.
Yeah.
Solo, most of these little solos where, you really, each little sound is kind of like savoured and presented in its own right. It's very tempting, you hear compositions, it's very tempting to have multiple layers constantly running, but she often reduces it down so you can just really hear the detail and the delicacy just in one little sound.
Very good subtractive synthesis going on in there. Yeah.
And also, there's not much in the way of recognizable instrumental sound, is there? You don't hear an instrument, you don't hear like in whatever.
That's very music concrete in a way.
Totally, yeah.
Concrete music. Then the GRM example in a way.
Yeah.
Why isn't she listed as a pioneer of electronic music then?
Well, that's why we're listing her, aren't we?
Yes, that's the truth. And she's around still.
Yes, that's a really important thing. Yeah, a really important thing that she's still with us. Yeah.
She's a pioneering electroacoustic music composer.
Yeah, and I think she started. I think she came to Europe from Argentina in '62. So she must have been a very, very young woman. And trained initially with Nadia Boulanger. And then moved into working moved into the GRM and worked with Pierre Schaeffer. She worked with him on his books.
Yes.
On the treatise on musical objects. Traité des objets musicaux.
Okay, thanks for the Spanish one. I like how the way your intonation changes, voice tone and everything. Yes, she did. She did help with that book a lot.
Yeah. Pierre Schaeffer's second book she worked with him on that as well, which was Solfège de l'objet sonore.
Audio documentary.
Yeah, music theory of the sound object. So that was 67.
Okay.
And also with Bernard Parmigiani, and I think there's...
Oh, yeah, there's another connection there with that.
Very strong connection. In the sound world of her pieces, you hear a lot of references to Parmigiani. She wrote a piece for his 80th birthday based on his piece Dedans dehors, which means inside outside, which is one of the tracks from De Natura Sonorum. But she wrote a piece for him called Deux dents dehors, which means two teeth outside.
Okay, so...
A little pun, a little joke, but it shows how important he has been to her.
Yeah, she mentions him a lot in the interviews also. Yeah.
And you can hear that. As I say, there's a definite relationship in the sound world.
Yeah.
She also went to study with Ligeti and L. Brown in Darmstadt.
Oh, so that's a very nice range of collaborations.
She was at the heart of that whole scene in the 60s.
So here we have a living figure who experienced both German and French schools.
Exactly. Not to mention the fact that she's female, of course, which has an influence in it.
Yeah, I would have loved to ask her how it was to be surrounded by so many men.
Yeah.
But the music of Darmstadt, I think there is this Ligeti style glissando sounds in the music. Yeah. I can hear the Darmstadt effect. Influence. Darmstadt influence.
Yeah. Ligeti, of course, he wasn't German. You know, I mean,
Hungarian.
yeah. You know, and you know, Germany, France, the GRM, the Darmstadt, and Cologne. These places were international.
Yeah, John Cage also came all the way from the USA to.
Yeah. You know, so it was a highly international scene.
Would have been very nice to have something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. But of course, these days that internationalism is so easily achievable because of the internet. You know, that we're all in touch with each other all over the world, really, and it's. But in those days, that was something quite a special thing to be that international.
Yeah. Interesting song titles, interesting track titles there.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
she's a woman of stories, storytelling.
She's a woman of stories, and also in this collection, there is, as I say, I mean, one of the pieces is called "The Invisible Thread." There is a thread running through here of she's obviously very interested in
second voice,
in Kabbalism and alchemy. You know?
Yeah, the alchemy reference, yeah.
There's references to medieval alchemy and Kabbalism all the time. And, you know, medieval alchemy is so much about change, transfiguration. One substance changing into another. You know, the process of change, one sound changing into another is how it works, comes across in her work.
Yeah, it also looks like, you know, you just close your eyes, you don't see, and all the focus is on the one changing sound and then the other one coming. That kind of music.
Yeah.
I see the invisibility recognized clearly now.
Yeah. And I think that's she's obviously done a lot of research, she has quite a profound understanding of these medieval alchemical and Kabbalistic ideas. I think the fourth piece in this collection, Les Larmes de l'Inconnu, the Tears of the Unknown, is very much about the Kabbalah. Yeah,
there is clearly a mention and a note about it in the program notes of the album. It says, this whole piece draws its fundamental inspiration from the schemes built by letters and numbers, added to the 3 levels of understanding of the universe.
Yes, the 3 different levels of the primordial equation of the universe.
Yeah.
That's pretty profound stuff.
It is, really. And maybe that's the quadraphonic aspect to add to the depth.
Well, it's funny, you know, it's with quadraphonic sound, with surround sound, people talk about it being immersive.
Yeah, this buzzword.
Buzzwords of immersive. And of course, you know, her first piece here the first piece in this collection from 1967, Aquatic Dwellings, des Murs Aquatiques. You can't get more immersive than literally being dropped in water, you know. The idea that you're underwater with little fish objects, whatever, moving around you in a 3D sphere, you know. So she was imagining and thinking in those terms.
Yeah.
And realising it electronically.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
Sort of almost 60 years ago.
Respect.
Respect to Beatriz.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
For listening and sharing this experience with us.
Yes, and sharing our the lovely home here in Ormond-Tepe.
Ormond-Tepe, yeah.